views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to Bronx Talk. It is no secret that if young people, and all people really, learn to express themselves through art and performance, then they become more creative. They can be more successful academically and better able to grow and develop in more productive ways. Tonight's guest is a Bronx man who has used his passion for comic books to support these agendas, not only here in the Bronx and New York, but throughout the nation and the world. So tonight we're going to welcome the creator of Blackjack. I've got samples that we're going to show you, and the award-winning co-founder of Kids Comic-Con, who will be here to talk about the thousands of children he's inspired around the globe, and also we'll take a look at some of the work. It's a pleasure to welcome back to Bronx Talk for the third time, the one and only Alex Simmons. Nice to see you, Alex.
Good to see you too, Gary. Yeah.
It's been a while, and had a chance to catch up before the show.
That's true, but you know we're both doing.
Yeah, I know. Well, you all over the world, me all over the Bronx. Nonetheless, before we even get in, we've got some unbelievable things to show you. Talk to me about why comic books and how did it get started, and it really started one way and now it's grown exponentially.
Well, again, we don't have 3 hours and we can't do a telethon. So the short story is obviously I was a single. My mother was a single parent. And I was the only child, and I had an avid, wild, active imagination, and I loved stories and things like that. So I was reading comics as a kid. I was watching television, all that, and just constantly trying to create stories with my action figures and things like that. Comics was one of my escape platforms. We grew up in what you would call an underprivileged scenario. So if I wanted to go into outer space, man, pick up a comic book. If I want to fight crime, pick up a comic book. I want to have superpowers, and you pick up a comic book. And this was a way of just stimulating and going, just going full out there, as opposed to being sort of stuck with the image that there's only the block and there's only what little of the world I was seeing on a daily basis.
What strikes me about what you said is that experience of understanding what this kind of comic book world is it sounds to me like exactly what you do when you go to children in the Bronx and in New York and all over the world.
You do what you experience, what you believe. Artists, and yes, writers are artists too. It's not just people who illustrate. Artists reflect their lives and the lives of others. That's what we do. We reflect, we share our experiences, we share what we believe, our philosophies and so forth. So yeah, absolutely, that's what I do.
In terms of the creation, and I don't want to keep saying we're about to show you, but we are about to show you. In terms of the creation, are you the writer, the illustrator, a little bit of both? Do you imagine what it looks like and then talk to an artist? Do you sketch it out? Or do you simply write the text and then somebody else is
okay, so you covered it, so folks will be back. No, basically, on the average, I am the writer-creator. I come up with the concepts, the story ideas. I sometimes work with other people, like another Bronx boy, Chris Ryan. We've been buddies for like 20, almost 30 years, and he also writes some of the Blackjack stuff. But I come up with concepts and ideas, and then I write a script, and I might sometimes do thumbnail sketches to suggest a particular scene, but then I turn it over to the seriously excellent illustrators that I've been able to work with over the years. So Joe Bennett, who, may I grab that?
Yeah, let's go. Well,
yeah,
I'm going to hold them up. Okay, so this is Blackjack.
Yeah, right. This is the first comic book series I created, Blackjack, and it's an African-American soldier of fortune in the 1930s. So you have that globe-trotting, Indiana Jones kind of backdrop, but it's a black man in the 30s. And as I like to say, we had just a few more challenges to deal with in the social strata. But the artist on that first series was Joe Bennett, and he's actually Brazilian. So Joe and I didn't meet. We were communicating through emails and things, and he was just outside of Sao Paulo, Brazil, and I'm here in the Bronx writing the scripts.
Let's see, how old, it does say at the bottom, Alex Simmons and Joe Bennett. How long ago were
the first
these ones?
miniseries was created in 1996. And actually, this is actually. Can I take this down for a second?
Yeah, of course. You can hold it up and show it to the camera. Go ahead.
Let's start with that one. That's the actual cover. That's one of the books printed back in '96. That's the third part of the story. It was a 3-part miniseries. This, which is a replication of the first cover in the first book we did, you'll notice. Can you read that? Can you actually read that?
Tweedlebeet van de Cobra. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, that's actually in Dutch because it's been reprinted in Holland. That's the original first miniseries was reprinted in Holland along with some of the other shorter stories.
I had asked you about this as we were preparing for the show about black action heroes, black comic book heroes. How unique is or was Blackjack? Was it a struggle, number one, to create it, and number two, maybe more importantly, to sell it to publishers who would say, well, wait a minute, Superman and Batman weren't black guys, you know, that kind of thing.
Well, not as far as we know. Okay. So the reality...
It depends who draws it.
Right. The reality and the experience that I had at the time, you know, if you take things chronologically, no, it was not the very first black characters to get out there. Actually, the Pittsburgh Courier, which was a newspaper back in the 50s, had black heroes in the comic strips, but it was a very singular experience in Pittsburgh in their newspaper. They had detectives and globetrotters and so forth. In terms of mainstream comics, as we know them, Marvel, you know, had Luke Cage and the Black Panther. DC eventually came out with, prior to that, DC came out with a cowboy hero called Lobo. He had, I think, 1 issue. But the bottom line is Blackjack, not having superpowers, not wearing a costume per se, taking place in the 30s, which allowed me to hit on certain historical things, that was unique. That was totally unique.
I want to just so people can see on the inside what this looks like. What is interesting to me, I don't know. You know, you and I have been friends for a very long time, and I know you as a very peace-loving man. These are you know, kind of violent images.
They're not kind of violent. There's violence in there.
All right. I guess I shouldn't soften what I'm going to say. What is your thought on this, or is this a fantasy and a healthful fantasy? Because I know when you teach these things with young people, number one, you don't limit them, but on the other hand, are these the images we want kids to have?
So for me, again, my life experience, in the era that I grew up, which is the 50s, 60s, even the 70s, the hero figures who were predominantly white on television, in the movies and in comics, who carried guns, had a code they lived by. Many of them did not take a life. You know, or if they did, there was some sort of emotional thing that they went through. You dealt with.
Excuse me, which is true. Batman, Superman, they never were in that situation, even in the TV shows.
Even in the TV series of The Lone Ranger, he did not kill. You know, Peter Gunn killed. Certain people killed, but the heroes for the kids, the Western heroes, they didn't kill. You don't take a life, and so that code was passed on with. You help other people. You don't ask for something in return. You don't cheat. You know, there were these codes that came with it. When, you know, appreciating those heroes and growing up with those heroes, and again, I didn't have a father at that point. My father was gone. So, you know, some of these were the male icons that I grew up looking at. The Lone Ranger and Tonto, the first, you know, white man and a Native American, working together as, you know, a solid bond as a team. That hit me. You know, the next thing that came along was Culp and Cosby and I Spy. You know, so that's the 50s and the 60s, and only those 2 scenarios showed me that we could do it together. So for me, I wanted to create a hero that looked like the kid who wanted to go on those adventures, which was me.
Wow.
Right? But I wanted him also to have a code. I wanted him to also wrestle with ethical challenges, even though he is a soldier of fortune. You know, you don't kill indiscriminately. You don't think that it's a cool thing to take lives. There's certain things that you have to deal with if you do take a life, or if you are supposed to protect a life.
So then Blackjack is a man of strength and a man of honor, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And a man also who is trying to figure out where he fits in a world where he's not supposed to have an identity at all.
I'm going to let that statement stand on its own. The next series here, Race Against Time.
So Blackjack was the first comic book series I wrote and actually published. The second one was Race Against Time, which is, they're not black, which was the thing that happened.
I did notice that. We could put that on the camera.
Which happened, you know, when I would go to conventions with Blackjack, everybody would see me, they'd see Blackjack, oh, that makes perfect sense. Then I, you know, came out later with Race Against Time, and they'd look at me and they sort of get startled, you know. as if we're not allowed to do that. On the other hand, if a white person had, black characters and white characters, what's the deal? So Race Against Time was based on a children's book series that a friend of mine had written for one of the major publishers, and it's a kid and his uncle who go on adventures, and they have to go on the adventures. The parents go out of town. The kid and the uncle go on the adventures. They could travel the globe, racing time to get where they have to go, fight the bad guys, win the situation, and get back before the parents find out. So it's a race against time. It's not about time travel.
You wake up in the morning and you say to yourself, I got an idea. Or do these ideas develop over time? Or you're riding on the subway one day and you say, maybe I develop it this way.
It's all of that. It's all of that. Ideas come to you. Many of us, unfortunately, squash them before we give them a chance. But ideas come to you, you jot them down, and either you develop them at that point or you pull them off the shelf months, years later and go for it.
Many of the great comic book writers, I'm proud to say, I'm a DeWitt Clinton graduate, have come out of,
which is right near here.
Near here, and come out of DeWitt Clinton High School, Superman and Batman. And of course, we're going to show.
If I remember right, Bob Kane, who created Batman, went to DeWitt Clinton.
I think my point is many of those comic book artists. This I thought was an unbelievable cover. Where, as you know, first of all, it brings it right up to date. Some of these are, maybe from the 90s or whatever. Look at this picture, folks. This is President Obama and Sarah Palin on Archie Comics. Now, Archie is a character, obviously, you didn't create.
No, I didn't.
But now, what would be your input and describe to me how you got involved with Archie Comics?
Well, writing Blackjack and getting the books out there and building a fan base brought me to the attention of DC Comics, which is what got me the assignment of working on Batman. And for DC Comics, they wanted me to create an African.
Oh, you're right. I had put that aside.
You did, but that's all right.
There's
I forgive
so
you.
many of
it's
them.
not. It's not. We're still good.
All right, you hold on, and you
okay.
could show people.
Where am I? Am I holding this?
Right
this one right here. Okay, so this is Batman: Orpheus Rising, and this was a mini-series I did for DC Comics. They said they wanted me to create a black superhero or a black crime-fighting character for the Batman universe, and this was a character I came up with and got to do the storyline on. So from doing my own stuff, I got the attention of DC, and Joe Ilyich and Denny O'Neil hired me to do a Batman storyline. At the same time, although I don't have them with me, I also got to do Scooby-Doo.
Wow.
So I'm doing Blackjack, Batman, Scooby-Doo.
It's a tremendous thing that this all develops, and then, listen, many of us grew up with DC Comics and Archie, and as a result, I hate to say it, moved into the mainstream, I guess.
Well, again,
it's all good, right?
It's all good being able to write iconic characters that you grew up watching or reading. There's a cool thing about, I wrote Sherlock Holmes too, and I grew up watching Sherlock and reading it. So
tell me about this Obama and Sarah Palin.
I've been doing a number of stories for Archie Comics, and Obama had already won the elections, and they said, we would really love a story where Obama and Sarah Palin, come to Riverdale for some reason. And I was thinking about what would I do, and I made a two-parter where Archie and Reggie and the gang do something regarding manipulating media for their own benefit, and then they use the president and they use Sarah Palin, which ticks both of those characters off, and they wind up coming to Riverdale to deal with the gang, and the gang has to deal with what they did and the ramifications of that action.
And the Riverdale is literally hop, skip, and a jump from here.
There's a shot where at the end of the first, there's a two-parter, I believe this should be the first book. So the first shot, there's this shot where you've got Obama and Palin come screeching in their separate, rovers with Secret Service, and they're looking for Archie and Reggie and them. And so again, people, and not to get political, but people do things, and if you do the wrong thing or you do an unethical thing, there are dues to pay.
Then this leads us right into talking to young people about creating comics. This is a large part of what you do, aside from your own creativity. So you take a current event or current topics. Talk to me about traveling all over the world. Let's start with, I think we have pictures of Belfast.
Oh, okay.
Belfast? Well, they'll put them up there. But you tell me about, for example, what did you do in Ireland? I think it was like a Skype presentation.
I went to Holland. I dealt with Ireland via Skype, exactly. The short story is I have a thing called Kids Comic Con. I'll just hold up the flyer for one of our events. It's an annual event we've been doing in the Bronx for 11 years.
I think these pictures are that they're showing.
Oh, they are?
They're showing the reel from Africa.
Okay, well, so the Kids Comic Con event, which we'll look at later, is something I created 11 years ago with Gene Adams at Bronx Community College. And because of that, we saw what kids were influenced by, you know, and we saw kids wanting to get into comics and all that sort of thing. I saw a lot of negative media hitting kids, you know, turning their heads about other races, cultures, genders, you know, all of that stuff, negativity. And I felt kids have, you know, I go to a different country, I meet kids, they're kids. I meet kids here, they're kids. There's curiosities, they love comics. So I said, let me use comics as a common denominator platform to introduce children from different countries to each other, much like the pen pal scenario. You know, so they get
in a modern way.
Yeah, so they get to see, oh, you're just like me, and oh, it's cool, you like to draw this, and you like to come up with that. So that's what we created, the KCC Comics Club International. And we connected a school in Wisconsin with some 50 kids in a small town, Ripon, Wisconsin, with kids in Belfast, Ireland, and children in Senegal. And they got to do a collaborative project together. And then we went to Senegal.
Now, when you say connect them, this was through technology?
Through
Skype
the internet and Skype and them sharing art files so they could build a project together.
So so they would sit in a classroom?
In their various locations, right.
And you would be either
on
there
the monitor,
or here?
I'd be on my computer being broadcast to them in their various locations.
And what would you say to them?
I would do my comics workshops. You know, I teach them how to create characters and so forth, have them come up with their own ideas. I encourage them to create their own characters, their own environment, help them figure out how to write it down, how to draw it, and then we combine them to create this sort of token-esque world where they have these wild characters in this continent that they all created.
And kids from Wisconsin and kids from
Africa and Ireland.
What are the results? Are the results that they produce something, of course, that they enjoy? I mean, is there something tangible?
They wind up with tangible artwork and a validation of their imagination, the creative process and experience, the understanding that you can conceive of something in your mind, and if you plan it out through a process, make it manifest. That's a formula that works whether it's comic books or engineering or chemistry or big business. You know, first you have to help kids understand what you come up with up here has some value. The education you get feeds that, the experiences you get feed that, and now you can use this channel to express yourself.
You know, I opened the show basically talking about these kinds of things can be inspirational for kids and help kids to learn and grow and develop. When you go, let's say, to a school in Wisconsin and you pitch this, I can't imagine that they say, oh, good, let's get this black guy from the Bronx, frankly, to come into our classroom and do this. Or are they dying for something like this and they say, thank you, Lord, for bringing Alex to us, and let's put this in place.
Let me not be negative. Let me simply say that probably 1 out of, I would use a different number under different circumstances, 1 out of 6 says, thank goodness, I want to do this, let's go, how do I do it? But you run into a lot of people who their attitude is either, no, we're just going to memorize and do this, or the other attitude I run into, what's in it for me? So forget about the kids, what do I get out of it? Meaning them. What do they get out of it?
And what do you answer for them?
If I can't get through to them and not embarrass my grandmother and mother, you know, I sort of let it go and I try and come back at a different. A lot of it is proving that kids are not simply robots to be programmed. Right. You know, a lot of it is getting adults to realize, you know what, you came up through this particular educational system and they took art from you. They took creativity from you. The training you just went through, they took all that. They squashed your imagination, so now you only know this. Give us a chance to show you that something else will support what you do.
Stupid question, but I've got to ask it. You see the results in the kids change, you watch them, and then all of a sudden they say, wow, we can do this, or we can do, right? I'm assuming
I work with a group called the Christopher Barron Live Life Foundation. Once every year for the past 8 years, I go to Paterson, New Jersey, and for 8 weeks I work with the 5th grade kids in a particular school right there. 8 years, same school, only the 5th grade each time I go. Over those years, kids who were in the 5th grade prior or 2 years prior, some of them will come down to the class and talk to their younger peers and talk about how I didn't know I could come up with anything. I didn't know I could do this. But this
Nobody
program,
ever told me.
Right, this program, and then I learned such and such.
Talk to me about Harlem to Harlem. What is Harlem to Harlem?
Okay, so the KCC Comics Club International, that's one way of introducing children from different backgrounds and so forth. Harlem to Harlem, a mutual friend of mine named Frederique Windhurst, that's right, I said Windhurst. If I pronounced it wrong, Frederique, forgive me. She lives in Harlem in the Netherlands, all right? And she was here in New York.
There's a place in the
right,
Netherlands.
there's a city in the Netherlands called Haarlem, with
Okay.
2 A's. And she was here in New York visiting a mutual friend, and we were talking, and we knew that the Dutch, Africa, America triangle was formulated, centuries ago through slavery. So she said in Holland, they were acknowledging this. That was the year that they were actually making sure that this was something that was talked about. So we came up with this idea of connecting a school in Haarlem, New York City, with a school in Haarlem in the Netherlands, and have a similar experience like with KCC Comics Club, where they work on a project, a comic book based project, and actually through at least 1 or 2 encounters, actually get a chance to meet and talk to each other through the internet and share ideas, what's their community like, their feelings on racism, diversity, multiculturalism, inclusivity, all of those things, and do this project that's based around the theme of slavery and where have we come since those times.
So if you're in a traditional classroom and you're opening up a textbook and you read about the Civil War and you read about slavery and you read about Abe Lincoln and all the other tentacles that go with that, I'm guessing this is an incredible way of teaching what it's all about.
It's a way to engage. It's also a way to generate discussion and better communication, and also to really combat our affliction of making assumptions about other people, races, cultures, and genders without ever meeting them, without having any experience, just going off of sound bites.
And I guess I have to ask you the same question that I asked you before. Kids respond? The
Yes.
kids, they
Yes, because I don't come into that, okay, this is a lesson you're going to have to, I come at them, okay, let's open our heads, let's talk, what do you think? Here's information, how do you want to process it? I make this a hands-on, engaging experience for them as best I can. And I let them know that I'm not asking you to create something that I want you to create. I want you to create something based on what we're sharing with you. So it's on you. How do you see it?
And they must have this feeling that aside from communicating with you, goodness gracious, how exciting. There's a youngster my age, my grade in the Netherlands, and they're communicating
And
with
some kids have never heard of.
You went to Moscow.
Yes, I did.
Tell me about the trip.
That was in May.
In May,
Yeah.
U.S. Embassy sponsored the trip.
Yeah, yep.
Talk to me about what that was like. Were you welcomed? I mean, Russia right now for an American is a very interesting place to be.
Russia. Let me put it this way: Russia, in terms of our political scenario for Americans and Russians, is, there's frenzy, there's crazy, there's assertions and so forth.
Tension.
But people to people, it's a whole nother bag. It's a whole nother thing, and that's the way I approach it. Remember, Chris Ryan, who I mentioned before, called it a People Over Politics tour. That's what he called what I was doing. And I was there literally for a comic festival.
To talk about comic books in Russia.
Right, with artists from several different countries. It wasn't just I go to Russia and talk to Russian artists. There were artists from the Congo, from Finland, from Belgium, from Italy, from Chechnya. It was a wild association and an assembly of talented people from different countries, and I was the American.
Well, I'm
from
sure
the Bronx.
There you go, from the BX. I'm sure you represented us well. You recently won an award, the Inkpot Award is what it's called. You were at Comic-Con in San Diego.
That's right.
And they presented you with this award, apparently by surprise.
Yeah, big surprise, yes.
And
standing with my mouth hanging open.
Go ahead, brag a little bit. Tell us about the Inkpot Award and what that was like.
San Diego Comic-Con's been around since the 70s, and over the years they've given out this award to people they feel that have contributed not only to the industry of comic books, but to fantasy, sciences, media, who've done something to broaden and share and I guess, as they like to put it, to help make the world a little bit better. And I felt I was totally flying under their radar, because I mean, notables are artists that I know in the comic book industry, but also, Steven Spielberg and George Lucas. So, I'm figuring, I'm down here doing my thing. And I was invited to the Comic-Con this year. They brought me out there and all this, and they said, you're going to have a panel, you're going to have a workshop, and you can do this and this. And I said, okay, great. And I go out there and I'm prepared to do my first panel, and it's going to, presentation, everything. And I'm standing there introducing me. I'm goofing with the person introducing me because
as only Alex can.
That's me. And suddenly she goes, and that's why having done all this, we present you with, and I'm like, oh, almost said something embarrassing, and I realized they were literally, I'm thinking, it's a mistake. No, they were really giving me this award, and a committee and people had voted that, yes, you deserve.
Well, you're certainly not going to get an argument here. If you take the sum total of all of these things, the comic books you've created, the movement into DC Comics, which for many people
the book that I've now written about.
I haven't have enough time.
Yeah,
to do
I
that.
know. Yeah, but, more books
and
coming out.
I'm guessing that the wheels are always turning. So
Yeah.
what's next, or is it more of the same, that you'll just reach more children, more countries, or do you have something else in your mind that you say, gee, you know what, this I ought to do also?
No, I'm a spontaneous kind of guy, but I do have a mission. I want to continue to build on this. I want to continue definitely to build on what I've been doing with Kids Comic Con and reaching people and all that. So I would say that from the trip to Russia, but also from all the work I've done speaking all over the country and so forth, the State Department's just put me on their speakers program. So I am now under consideration to be sent to a number of different countries to speak.
On behalf of the United States of America.
Yep. And to talk about comics and creativity and diversity and all those things, all the things that I've been talking about for 30 years.
All right, I'm going to ask a bad question.
Yeah,
we love exporting our experts
Yep.
from the borough of the Bronx. Is there any chance the New York City Department of Education would say, gee, why don't we do these kinds of things here?
You asked an interesting question. I'll give you my interesting answer. Numerous opportunities they've had to do that. Some people have said, yes, come and do this here. On a larger scale, no.
All right.
Yeah.
Well,
so we'll see what happens. The future is the future. Yeah.
Then what I've done is what I should do, and that is put you on television in the Bronx, New York, in your hometown, not too far from where you live.
Exactly.
And give the people of New York and the BX a chance to really help our kids grow and learn and develop. Alex, if I had an Inkpot Award, I'd give you one too. Thank you so much for your
Gary,
time
it's always
tonight.
good to see you, man.
It's great. Folks, if you have further questions or comments on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, you send us an email at bronxtalk@bronxnet.org. You can tweet us at BronxTalk or post them on our Facebook page and we'll read them on the air during a future edition of our program. You can check out the archives at bronxnet.org. You find Bronx Talk in the lower right navigation bar. Political season is coming up in 2 weeks. We'll start 3 weeks of debates. So wholly different from what we did tonight. Anyway, thanks to Lindsay, the producer. The director is Brianna, and we will see you every
I guess sometimes things just happen. Devastating things. Your whole world changes in an instant. That's what happened to me the day my mother had a stroke.
I'm Paul George, and I want you to spot a stroke fast.
F, face drooping. A, arm weakness. S, speech difficulty. T, time to call 911.
Protect the ones you love.
Spot a stroke fast.